G'day guys, we finally have the index for World Eaters in our hands, so let's have a look at what these blood-soaked maniacs can do in 10th edition Warhammer 40k.
Look for the Blood God.
Alright, next we have potentially my favourite unit in the new World Eaters book, and this is one that has not caused insignificant drama and controversy online. The Helbrute. Now, this guy is something that I've been having a lot of fun with in the previous edition, but he gained a new ability that's very, very interesting and has brought up some interesting rules debates already. So let's have a look at what this guy does. Alright, so there's a few things on his datasheet that are interesting. He's toughness 9, 8 wounds, but he has got an inbuilt 2-up arm save, which is very interesting in this edition because AP is generally going to be lower across the board, which means this guy's going to be getting saves against most incoming attacks, which means he's a fair bit tougher than he previously was, and that's going to be really important in a moment. Alright, he has some really interesting war gear options. This guy's probably the most flexible unit in the book in terms of weapon loadout. He's got all different types of guns, all different kinds of combat weapons. What I think is going to be the most competitively viable is double fist with heavy flamer in the palms. I think this is going to be really, really interesting, particularly because of the ability on this guy's datasheet. There is an argument for something like the las cannon or the multi-melter in order to get some ability out of that as well, but I think depending on how this all pans out and what ruling ends up going forward, the heavy flamers and the power fists is going to be really interesting. The power fists giving him reroll wounds because they count as twin linked, and then the heavy flamers giving you the ability to fire out multiple rounds of D6 auto-hitting weapons. It's going to be really, really interesting. But let's have a look at that rule on his datasheet and talk about some of the implications. Alright, so basically what it does is every time an enemy unit targets the Helbrute, after it's finished making its attacks, the Helbrute can shoot as if it were the shooting phase or fight as if it were the fight phase. Now, there's a lot of people saying, cool, what you do is you take the missile launcher and the las cannon and you sit him on the backfield, and if anybody tries to shoot him, he just gets to shoot back. And there's no limit on how many times you can do this. So every time they hit you, you shoot back. They hit you again, you shoot back. Which means people are only going to shoot you if they know they can kill you in one volley, because there's no point just throwing throwaway damage into him. But in this edition, it's looking like that's exactly what's going to be required. Even big things like las cannons, it's going to take multiple las cannons to kill this guy, which means he's going to get multiple rounds of las cannons back into you. So that's one way that people are talking about running him. However, I'm more interested in the fight ability. Now, basically what it is every time an opponent targets you with an attack, they don't even have to make the attack, they just target you with an attack. When they're finished making their attacks, you get to fight. So in the core rules, it does specify that a unit cannot fight more than twice. However, in 40k, it is a general understanding that anything written in a codex overrules anything in the core rules. That's how we are allowed to, for example, set things up in Deep Strike and bring them in turn 1 if they're a drop pod, for example. Or, you know, there's numerous examples of things that are written into a codex that specifically and explicitly overwrite the core rules. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that that's how this is going to work, and I'm not necessarily saying that that's how this should work. However, there is a strong argument that rules as written, this guy will be able to fight multiple times because his datasheet specifically says every time your opponent targets you, after they've finished making their attacks, you get to fight. So that overrules the rule in the core rules that specifies you only ever fight once. And basically what this means for the Helbrute is you're going to charge into your opponent, you're going to fight them, then they're going to fight you back, then you're going to fight them again, because they've just allocated attacks onto you, or they've selected you as the target of an attack, and therefore, after they resolve their attacks, you get to fight again. Which means the Helbrute is going to be fighting twice at least, right? But it gets really interesting where because he's got a decent sized base, if you're able to charge him in such a way that he ends with an engagement range of multiple units, let's say there's 2 units nearby, maybe it's a rhino and some guys that jumped out of the rhino, you're going to be able to move in and tag both, fight into the guys that jumped out, kill a bunch of them, then they fight, then you get to fight again, you fight into those guys again, kill the rest of them. Now you're still engaged with the rhino. That rhino now must attack you, and therefore it's going to hit you, and you're going to get to fight again into the rhino. So being able to just go fight, 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 every time somebody touches you, you get to fight them back, is just going to be an absolute nightmare for combat armies to deal with. Being able to fight multiple times with this guy, effectively unlimited number of times, is just insane. This becomes even more pronounced if you kill the unit that you're engaged with. So say there's a unit of 5 scouts or something like that, and you go in, you fight them, they fight back, you fight again and kill them, and now you're free to consolidate. So you consolidate and you tag something else, it fights into you, you fight, kill it, now it's dead, so you get to consolidate again as part of your fight, you consolidate into another unit, it now has to fight you, which means you get to fight again, and you could send this guy in like a pinball that just goes in and wrecks up their backfield. So this is definitely something that you want to get clarified with the tournament organizer at any event that you go to, and hopefully GW addresses this with an FAQ early. This is not the only unit that does it. There's a few units in the game that have this. One would suggest that this is the case because obviously there's no limit on how many times he can shoot. Nowhere in the core rules does it specify you can only shoot once. And the fight once, it seems to me like that's designed to stop people from just trying to fight over and over and over. Like it's not a hard rule. It's specifically overridden by the ability on this guy's datasheet. And most abilities specify, the idea is that they overrule, If you've got an ability that lets you shoot in your opponent's turn, well, nowhere in the core rules does it say you can shoot in your opponent's turn. So it's a bit ambiguous, and I definitely think it's worth reaching out to your TO in advance and just saying, hey mate, just wanted to clarify that is this how this rule works? And if they say yes, because they're following rules as written, and that is how it is written in the book, well then 3 Helbrutes is straight away one of the interesting things that I think a lot of people are going to want to plug into their lists, because you can just go in and go crazy with these guys. And those fists do significant damage. They get reroll wounds, so they're going to be killing those big chunky targets. You can advance and charge with these guys. You can heroically intervene with these guys. You can, do all kinds of crazy stuff with these Helbrutes. So I think that's a really exciting way of running them, and I think this is a really interesting unit for that reason. An argument could be made that you could go, I'm going to have, the DACA version, or maybe a mix. Maybe you have a couple of DACA ones and a couple combat ones, or up to 3 total. I think it'll be interesting to see where people land on that. I personally think just having full combat pressure is the most fun way to run World Eaters, at least. So being able to just throw those Helbrutes out and be like, yep, cool, he's going to fight you and then fight you and then fight you and just run through your lines, means your opponent's going to have to deal with them, which means they're not firing those guns at your other units. So let me know what you guys think, particularly on whether or not you think this is a legal option and whether or not you think this is the direction they're going to go, or do you think this is a bit excessive, a bit cheesy, and a bit, power gamer style. I think definitely is something I wouldn't do in casual games against, friends or whatever, or, pick up games at a game store or something like that. However, for the purposes of competitive tournaments, I see no reason why, rules as written, this is not allowed. And I think given some of the other crazy combos that we're seeing coming out of other codexes, I don't think it's particularly unfair or unbalanced either. I think it's an interesting one. It's going to be difficult to execute, but if you are able to execute it, it's going to be really, really cool.
Look for the Blood God.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment, he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.